For floors to walls and everything in between. Make your best home anything but ordinary. At Home and Things.
Listeners to Love 101 FM are advised that the views and opinions expressed in this program are not necessarily those of Love 101 FM.
Hello and welcome to the Morning Watch on Love 101 FM. I'm your host, Dylan Toussaint. A special welcome to our listeners on love101.org. And if you're overseas and on the move, US listeners can access us at 712-832-8001. And if you're in the UK, 0330-332-6541, or join us via the Love 101 FM app that can be downloaded from the Google Play Store or the Apple Store. You can also join us on Love 101 FM Facebook and YouTube Live. In the first watch today, in light of concerns about cultic practices, should churches be regulated by the government? And in the second watch, is there really an overbuilding of multiple family houses? Our social media question we ask, what are your thoughts on churches being regulated by the government? Share your responses on our Facebook page, Love 101 FM, and also on WhatsApp, 876-997-3125, using the tag, The Morning Watch. We'll share your responses later on in the program, but before all of that, here's I quote.
This morning's I quote, families are like fudge, mostly sweet with a few nuts. Right.
I am speechless, Shivani. I am speechless. How are you? How are you, Shivani?
I'm good, friend. How are you doing?
I'm doing well, you know. You have any nuts in your family?
No.
Apart from peanuts, cashew nuts. Let's leave it alone. Shivani. All right. Yeah, man. The first watch will be back after this break.
I am Adinir Jones, Executive Chairman of the Church of God in Jamaica. I have taken the vaccine. My family has taken the vaccine. The COVID-19 virus is making people very sick. All of us by now, we know someone who has died from it. The virus is having devastating effect upon the life of the nation as a whole. There is no justification from the Bible that the vaccine is the mark of the beast. There's a lot of confusion around that idea, but I want to assure you, there is no biblical grounding. So I encourage you, my friends, go and take the vaccine. Protect yourself, protect your family.
Ready, set, save big on all your brand name items in the Home and Things Best Brand Sale event. Get the lowest prices on tiles, bathroom fixtures and faucets, laminate flooring, lighting, windows and doors, plus more, even on new arrivals. Shop top brands like American Standard, Moen, Corona, Hunter, and Angel Grace. Visit our showrooms at Old Road Road and Constant Spring Road. The Best Brand Sale event now on at Home and Things. Shop now for the best brands, big value, and even bigger savings.
Welcome back to the Morning Watch. I'm your host, Dylan Toussaint. Now, the suggestion that the church should be regulated by the government is back on the table. But as expected, not everyone is in agreement. However, With reports of cultic events occurring within a church a few days ago, the need to discuss the issue has taken renewed relevance and importance. To discuss these and other related issues, we have online the Reverend Dr. Ralston Nemhard, retired Anglican priest, social commentator, and the Reverend Dr. Glenroy Layla, pastor of the Bethel Baptist Church in Halfway Tree. Good morning, colleagues.
Good morning, Brother Dylan. Morning, Reverend Nemhard.
Okay. Nemhard, are you on with us? I'm seeing Reverend Layla, but I'm not seeing Reverend Nemhard nor hearing him. Okay. Perhaps he's not fully on as yet. Reverend Nemhard?
Yes, good morning.
Yes, good morning. Good to have you with us this morning as well. How are you?
I'm doing very well. It's a pleasure being here.
Right.
Good morning.
How are you doing, Brother Glenroy?
I am doing well, thank you. And I hope you're doing well.
Yes. I'm doing well, thanks. I'm doing well. Okay. Colleagues, in order to verify that we are all on the same page, tell us, what is your understanding of government regulation of the church? What may that entail as you understand it? Beginning with you, Reverend Nemhard.
All right. My basic thinking is that at the barest minimum, any organization that says it's a church or purports to be a church should be registered. And the criteria for registration, you can determine that, whether it's training or, some other things. But it cannot be that an entity that enjoys the kind of privilege that the church has, can operate without any kind of, oversight from the authorities that grant that privilege, like in the area of taxes, for example. The churches in Jamaica are, operate tax-free. The property, they don't pay property tax and all that. And I believe that there has to be some kind of, oversight, a greater oversight. I think there's a little, but there needs to be probably a stricter scrutiny that is exercised over these entities.
All right, so you are interpreting government regulation as basically oversight of the church.
Yes, oversight.
Oversight is your word.
You don't want to get to a position where you know the nature of the church. And when I say oversight, it's basic registration. That at the very least, however small the church is, it ought to be registered, whether it's going to be through the Companies Act or something like that. And probably a yearly report of its status reported to that entity. And
yearly reports
for that that it is active and that it is, under your radar at some level.
Under radar, registered, yearly report, oversight. All right, Reverend Layla, what's your understanding?
Yes, I think both of us can agree on one thing, and it is that we have to make a distinction, in my view, between regulation and accountability. I think churches, as Reverend Nemhard is suggesting, ought to be accountable. I think that the question is not that you should be accountable, but to whom should you be accountable? Should you be accountable to the government? And what should be the level or to the extent of that kind of oversight? My own opinion, as I've expressed, is that I am generally reluctant for churches to be accountable in any specific way to governments. And my reason is that from my own experience, when I say experience, I mean denominational experience as a Baptist. Whenever there is the issue of this convergence of church and state, a section of the church ends up being persecuted and ends up being discriminated against. That has happened throughout the history of the church, from the Reformation right up to Jamaica. There was a time in this country, Jamaica, where a Baptist pastor like myself would have had to receive a license from the government to preach. And persons like William Nib and others were not able to operate as pastors initially. I had to pretend to be teachers in order to be able to proclaim the gospel. So there's a little reluctance on my part for that kind of intrusive control by government, as is happening now in Denmark, where government, for example, are saying that all sermons must be translated into Danish, and that is creating a bit of a concern from the church there. So I'm a little reluctant for that. However, I am all in favor of accountability and self-regulation. And there's a sense in which the question is not whether or not we are regulated. It is the extent, because we are regulated to an extent now. And I can give you two quick examples. Number one, if you, Reverend Toussaint, are required by a congregant or someone to sign a passport document for them, the only way you can sign it is if you are a gazetted minister of the, in other words, you have a marriage license and you're gazetted. Without that, you can't sign it. So that's an extent of where the government is saying, these are the persons that we recognize, those that we can vouch for, those that we can do. Those of us who are registered under the Company Act or the Act of Incorporation, that carries with it certain legal reporting requirements that persons have to use each year. So there's so the question is not whether we are regulated, it's the extent of it. When you start to intrude now into sermons and who to do what and who to go where, that's where I have the problem.
Well, Dr. Nemad, any response to that?
Yes. You hear me?
Yes, we're here.
Yes, hearing you and seeing you.
Okay, because I had a little technical issue here. Anyway, yes, I would not say that when you talk about registration, it certainly would not include anything having to do with what the church teaches, preaches, or how it seeks to constitute itself. Those things have to be out of the picture altogether. But from there ought to be some kind of scrutiny. And, as Glenroy was saying, you do have some, but it is the extent to which that is done, because I don't know the statistics, but I can, if I were a betting person, I would say that perhaps a good 50% or so of the churches that are operating in Jamaica are not under the scrutiny of any kind of governmental authority at all. And yet they are allowed. A person can go to bed, have a nightmare, get up in the morning and say, boy, I'm going to form a church. And he goes and hangs a shingle, and starts to collect money from people. And he could be collecting a whole lot of money in time. And yet all of that, and he's not paying tax on that money. In a real sense, that's income to the church. And yet you're not getting any kind of scrutiny from any governmental body with regard to that. So I agree with him, with Glenroy, that it's the extent to which this is being done. But it cannot be anything having to do with the church's polity. It's, what it teaches, what it preaches, or anything like that, because that would be really intrusion at a point where I do not believe the state has any kind of responsibility at all. I mean, before you know it, they become a thought police, policing the functions of the church. That is not what is envisaged.
Yes. All right, gentlemen, we're up on a break. Could you hold your thoughts, please? We'll be right back in a moment.
Sure.
155 reports of child abuse in Jamaica. Report child abuse. Call 211.
The time brought to you by Child Protection Services is
7:15.
Digicel go on with a whole heap of something. Like the 7 gigabytes of YouTube data you know get when you activate a 7-day Digicel Prime bundle. And a whole heap more any-use data. Moving from 6 to 8 gigabytes. Plus you get 49 gigabytes to enjoy more sports, music and movies. With Digicel apps, a really whole heap of something that for the same price. Only $850. Activate your 7-day Prime bundle in the My Digicel app today. Digicel, better together.
PSOJ's Crime Stop Jamaica unsolved. Help us to solve the gruesome murder of Miss Hazel Nemad, a retired returning resident. Her body was found lying in a pool of blood with her head bashed in at her home at 7 Corlets Road, Spanish Town at 8 a.m. on Thursday, November 12, 2020. She was last seen at 7 p.m. the night before. Hazel Nemad's murderer had gained access through a grilled louver window. Crime Stop Jamaica and family members are offering a total reward of $500,000 for information leading to an arrest and charge. Call Crime Stop Jamaica 311. Solving crime pays.
Welcome back to the Morning Watch. Thanks for staying with us. I'm your host, Dylan Toussaint, and in this, the first watch, we're discussing the whole matter of the churches. Should the churches be regulated by the government? And we have online Reverend Dr. Ralston Nemhard, priest and columnist in The Observer, social commentator, and Reverend Dr. Glenroy Layla, pastor of the Bethel Baptist Church, Halfway Tree. Reverend Layla, how would you respond to the view that in light of what took place over the past 2 weeks, if there was regulation in a more stringent measure, what took place would have been avoided?
There's no evidence that is the case, and I mean, we can't be too sure. The fact is that we do have a lot of regulations and rules for the road, but we still have accidents and people using vehicles for homicide. So that the fact of regulation will not prevent some things from happening, and you will always have exceptions, and that is the danger that we face. We can't allow that an exception is going to cause us to take a knee-jerk reaction and then to forget the bigger and the longer picture. The concern that I have is not that we should not be accountable and that there ought not to be self-regulation. If you're a lawyer in Jamaica and you breach certain canons of ethics, you can be disbarred and prevented from practice, not by the government, but by the General Legal Council, which is lawyers regulating themselves. Similarly with the doctors, with the engineers, with a lot of other professions. I'm saying that there's room and need for the church, not just denominationally, because most denominations do have their own systems of regulation, but perhaps the church as a whole, maybe under the various groupings, Council of Churches, Evangelical Association, and so forth. Maybe under those kinds of situations, there can be that kind of regulation. So my issue is not accountability. We ought to be accountable, ought to pay taxes, ought to open our books. If you're collecting money from the public, you ought to open it for public scrutiny. That's not my issue at all. The issue is who should be responsible for regulating. And whenever the state is now the one determining how churches operate, then it becomes problematic.
You're speaking about self-regulation. How would that work out though? Because, persons who are regulating themselves will end up abusing the system, turning a blind eye to certain things that are important. Shouldn't we have an external body like the government doing that type of regulation and accountability?
Why can't you have an external body like each other? For example, if I'm a member of the Jamaica Council of Churches, I could have a referent body that may be the Jamaica Association, peopled by persons from the Jamaica Association of Evangelicals or Seventh-day Adventists or some other place. Why can't we have that external need not mean government. That's what I'm saying.
Why not the government?
Because the government, there's a long discussion, and I don't know if we'll have the time for it, to deal with this whole matter of church and state. And as I mentioned to you earlier, the history of the consequence, the implications of that. The other issue is that we are operating from two different worldviews. Granted, the moral framework may be similar, but we're operating from two different worldviews. And government's understanding of theological and ecclesial matters would not make them competent to be regulating and determining the operations of church polity, church leadership, church structures, church forms, and so forth. So, and that is why I would not go for government, but there can be external regulation.
Reverend Nemard, what's your take on that? Why not the government?
I can't see that you're going to allow an entity, any entity, whether it is church, NGO, or any other organization at all in Jamaica, or any country for that matter, and give them that level of privilege where they can be out there collecting enormous sums of money. They're tax exempt from most things. If they sell a property, then they are subject to the same kind of property tax payments like any other entity. And if they rent a property, then they're deriving income, and they ought to be reporting that income to the revenue service. But I cannot see that you have that elaborate privilege and you don't come under some kind of scrutiny from the government that allows you that privilege.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm saying. At the barest minimum, you ought to be registered. You ought, if I call up the company's office or something, I need to find you there. And as a matter of fact, at the end of the year, you need to send in a report to the company secretariat or whatever, saying that you are still active. The whole idea is to keep you in the radar, that you cannot say that you're just out there operating, enjoying these privileges, and there's no accountability at all. So as I said earlier, so many churches in Jamaica are not even registered. And yet they can be doing, what they're doing without any kind of scrutiny. I mean, that cannot be. I'm not saying that you're going to intrude on the church's polity and how they organize themselves. That is not what is intended. But there must be some mechanism of accountability if you're going to have that enormous privilege. Because the moment the government begins to remove those privileges, if the government says tomorrow that we're going to tax our church, you're going to have to start paying property tax, I can see demonstrations. And governments would not want to touch that in Jamaica because of the whole political implications. But it cannot be that you're allowed to just operate, and at the barest minimum, you're not registered.
So if I'm hearing you correctly, Reverend Nemard, at least in some way, the government should have a say in terms of the accountability, to use Reverend Leila's word, right? It should not be devoid of the government.
Right, and not accountability in terms of jurisdiction over the whole ecclesiastical life of the church. No, that is not intended at all. Right. But at least for them to know
that a yearly report.
A yearly report to say that you're still active. And it's all a matter of, guaranteeing that you are there and that we have an eye on you still. That if you, I'm not saying that would prevent what happened in St. James at Albion, that kind of scrutiny, because as, Glenroy, rightly said, you just can't guarantee those things. But at least if you know that you are was that church, for example, registered? I'm not even sure. It wasn't even part of any kind of of any body, any church body, JCC and so on. And yet it was
not locally, maybe. Yeah, I'm happy you're going there, Reverend Nemard, because not locally, but it seemed to have been a part of a body globally.
Uh-huh.
All right. Reverend Leila, you wanted to come in?
No, I'm saying
Yeah, Reverend.
If you don't, yeah, I'm saying two things really. Number one is, okay, so you have to send in some registration documents annually, and if you don't, what happens? You know, that's the other question. That's one question. And my other one is, I am not advocating for churches to receive special privileges over and above any other section of the population. Certainly, I'm not advocating that at all. I believe that we live in a pluralistic society, and the church should, as a part of this pluralistic society, pay its fair share of taxes and participate fully in the life of the community under all of the regulations that govern everybody else, because we are part of the society. What I'm against is any singling out for any particular kind of treatment. And I'm adding to that, any singling out for any special privilege. I know that won't be popular among many church persons, but I don't think church should demand or desire privilege. That's not where Jesus stood. He never stood seeking privilege in a society. He paid his fair share of taxes, even though he had it from a fish on the belly of a fish. He did what he was required of him. Give to Caesar what is to Caesar. But there are some things that are to God that we should leave to God.
But yet they do enjoy that.
Yes, Reverend, you wanted to.
Yeah, they do enjoy that privilege, and if you try to remove it, then you'd have quite a protestation against that.
Right, and the privilege itself has been related to this linking of church and state. There was a time when you had state church, and in some parts in Jamaica, and recently, just being changed in some parts of Europe, it was the government who used to pay the salaries for the ministers. I think perhaps it may still be the case in Suriname, if I'm not mistaken, for some churches that was associated with the state. Many of the church buildings were constructed by government for the particular state church, and that's where this idea of the privilege has come from. I think that government in their regulations do give some benefits to persons, to organizations that are serving people, doing social work and serving people. That is done under the Charities Act. Have no difficulty with that once it is applicable to everybody, and not so much supporting any special or particular privilege, because that is also an indication of this church-state nexus.
Yeah, gentlemen, the way forward then, because what took place over the past 2 weeks, so unfortunate, and there are persons who are still wondering if we do not have other churches involved in cultic activities already. In fact, I'm of the view that if the deaths didn't take place, right, in Albion, we perhaps would not be having this discussion today, right? Quite likely there are other cultic activities taking place. So what do we do going forward as a nation? Because we are very concerned, all of us, about what has happened and what could have happened. Reverend Nemad?
Right, and there's a sense in which the government, like what happened in Albion and what might in fact be happening, like you said, that we don't even know of, because entities that are not under the radar of any kind of scrutiny, they tend to behave in ways that are untoward. And I believe, again, if that entity is registered, and there is even a periodic visitation, let's say, from the entity that gives you that registration, then you might be able to detect some of these things before they really get to find. I know the whole idea of the government visiting a building and so on, but we have to make a separation. Separation of church and state doesn't mean that in a society you can just hang a shingle and operate as you wish. As an informal entity. It's like many of these businesses that are informal. 40% of Jamaican businesses are informal, and probably about 60% of the church are informal in the sense that they're not even attached to any kind of umbrella group.
Yeah,
that cannot be.
Reverend Nemad, I wanted to give Reverend Layla a final word, but time is up on us. So I have to regulate the discussion.
Yeah. I am on that again.
I am
no problem at all.
accountable to Love FM. So, gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us. Have a wonderful day. Eh?
It's my pleasure.
All right.
Nice.
Listeners, the Body Watch will return in just a moment.
Of tiles for every room. So trendy, sophisticated, stunning, yet cool. Simply unique. Tiles for floors to walls and everything in between. Make your best home anything but ordinary. At Home and Things.
Between 2015 and 2020.
If you know about illegal guns, if you know about murder, if you know about drugs, gangs, or scams, connect with crimestopjamaica.com or call 311 toll-free. Don't tell us your name. Tell us what you know. A reward is offered for information that leads to an arrest. crimestopjamaica.com or call 311. Crime Stop. Solving crime pays. Crime is a disease, and you can help cure it.
211 is a hotline dedicated to reporting child abuse. It is easy to remember and accessible 24 hours a day across all networks. Report all forms of child abuse, sexual abuse, physical abuse, emotional, neglect, and trafficking. Our children are depending on us to protect them. If you see something, make the call. Report child abuse. Call 211.
Youth Zoom, zeroing in on zealous youth. Yes, for the month of November, join us as we showcase our young people making big moves. Youth Zoom, every Tuesday and Thursday at 9:30 inside Love in the Morning. Zeroing in on zealous youth. November is Youth Month, so join us every Tuesday and Thursday at 9:30 inside Love in the Morning with me, Shivani Blair, your Youth Ambassador. Youth Month 2021. Come hear the stories, the testimonies, the hills and the valleys, and how they overcame. Join us for an exciting story. Youth Zoom, every Tuesday and Thursday at 9:30 inside Love in the Morning, zeroing in on zealous youth.
Your rundown and fried dumpling tastes extra nice. It's New Pack coconut oil you use.
You mean New Pack everything? I use New Pack coconut milk powder and then new seasonings in the rundown. Them all start sell flour. Is that and the coconut oil sweet up the dumpling?
New Pack have more products?
Yes, child. And you know New Pack are my brand from a long time.
True. You always talk about the quality and affordability.
Create something special with New Pack. New Pack, more than just value.
Welcome back to the Morning Watch. I'm your host, Dylan Toussaint. Let's take a look at the newspapers to see what Jamaicans and others are saying and doing in the Gleaner. We did have plenty more beach. NEPA urged to take action to save St. Elizabeth shoreline. And then AIC backs off PCR tests, docking salary for now. And also slain blood drinker sought Smith's protection. Cops believe. Wow. In the Observer, no one is safe until everyone is safe. That's what our Prime Minister told the world leaders at the climate crisis at the summit. There needs to be some urgent response on COVID-19, he states. And then black man's arrest, bothered soldier, witness testifies. And we also see here in the Observer, COVID test model, 100,000 unapproved kits imported. Private entities earning huge profits. Interesting. Well, coming up next, we'll read some of the feedback from our Facebook and WhatsApp question. What are your thoughts on churches being rated by the government? Please leave a comment on our Facebook page, Love 101 FM Jamaica, or WhatsApp 876-997-3125. We'll be right back.
It's time for young people to roll out. And speaking of roll out, Campus Connection will be doing so in fine style for the month of November. Join the Campus Connection family this Tuesday, November 2 at 5:30 p.m. as we take a look at all the ministries planned for Youth Month with guest Minister of State in the Ministry of Education, Youth and Information, Robert Nestor Morgan. And guess what? Love 101's Youth Ambassador Shavoni Blair will join the Campus Connection family for the entire month of November. How cool is that? That's Campus Connection this Tuesday, November 2 at 5:30 p.m. right here on the family station, Love 101.
Youth is the transitional age between childhood and adulthood. Some of the best times in life come during our youth. What one learns at this young age, the company that he keeps, the path that he follows, and the lessons of life he takes makes a person what he will become tomorrow. Did you know youth is an extremely important time in everyone's life? Yes, the youth of a nation are its leaders of tomorrow, and so it is vital to educate them with good and strong values and deep thoughts. Hi, I'm Shavoni Blair, your youth ambassador, just reminding you it's Youth Month. Keep safe and keep it locked to the family station, Love 101.
I'll lean on you, lean on me. We got this.
Imagine styles of tiles for every room. So trendy, sophisticated, stunning, yet cool. Simply unique. Tiles for floors to walls and everything in between. Make your best home anything but ordinary. At home and things.
Welcome back to the Morning Watch. I'm your host, Dylan Toussaint. Let's join Shavoni for a look at how our Facebook and WhatsApp friends answered today's question. What are your thoughts on churches being regulated by the government? Shavoni.
Good morning. Were the church to be regulated by government, the church could lose its freedom to speak against any wrong that the government does. Also, the church could be accused of political bias by unscrupulous or corrupt governments. I think there should be specific criteria that a religious group should meet and adhere to for it to be qualified as a church. An interdenominational body could be authorized to see to this. Okay, thank you.
All right. Hyacinth on Facebook says God is able to deal with cultic so-called churches. See what happened the other day. Right. So wait on the Lord. Lauren says regulation is a must in growth and development. Tracy says trust me. Okay, that's something else, Tracy. This one says quite an informative program. Thanks. Send the link. Yes, it's on YouTube. So when it's over, you can go back and listen. All right. Hyacinth says Jesus' church has already been regulated by him in the Bible. There is a need, nevertheless, for something to be put in place regarding cultic assemblies to differentiate them from the other churches. All right, I think we'll leave it there. Keep the conversation going, folks.
Mouthful there. Thank you very much, Shavoni.
Indeed.
And thanks to those who responded. We appreciate your responses. Well, listeners, as we segue into the second watch, the real estate sector in Jamaica is seemingly busy with what's going up all across the country. In fact, a recent Observer article focused on what is dubbed the overbuilding of multiple family units, albeit in Upper St. Andrew. So, what is this overbuilding really about? How is it determined? What are the causes and consequences of it? Also, what can or should be done in light of it? Well, to answer these and other related questions, we have joined us on Mr. Lenworth Kelly, President of the Master Builders Association of Jamaica. He's also a contractor and a builder. And Mr. Donovan Reed, President of the Realtors Association of Jamaica. Good morning to you, gentlemen.
Good morning.
Good morning, Dylan.
Yes, good morning.
All right, good to have you both with us this morning. Let me begin with you, Mr. Reed. We're talking about, well, the article mentioned multiple family houses. Is it any different from the regular housing schemes that we are accustomed to? What's that all about?
Well, the regular housing schemes that we are accustomed to are the standalone bungalows with your own yard space, no shared amenities or common areas, less density in terms of people per location, the harbor views, the Mona Heights, the Hope Pastures, the Havendale, Duane Park, Washington Gardens, Coral Gardens, that sort of thing. Even I would even put in places like New Harbor Village. They are standalone units. The multiple family units now are those, the strata, the apartments, the sort of condo type. And the feature is you have the shared amenities, the common areas, shared maintenance cost. There's a greater density of persons and households in one location. To use technical language, the multifamily houses, vertical subdivision. What we're accustomed to, horizontal subdivision.
Okay. All right. Mr. Kelly, I want to ask you first this question, and I'm going to throw it to Mr. Reed after. All right. Based on your profession, what are the pros and cons, would you say, of such housing developments?
Well, you're as cities,
housing developments. Are you hearing St. Babina? Okay.
Yeah, as cities develop urban spaces, our cities and towns, one of the things you'll find is that land becomes scarce because population grows, but you have a finite land space. And so in the past, would have had generally houses, a few apartments, but as land becomes scarce, or just in some areas, just no more land, you get into what you call redevelopment. Because remember, your population is still growing and people need to live somewhere. So the natural order of things in for such areas would be that you go denser. So if you go in houses, you'll be find that there are smaller houses on smaller plots of land, or houses with 2-3 floors on smaller lots. The most common thing that you may find more affordable is to do what we call apartments. Higher density housing, really, as Donovan said, it's vertical. So you go up as high as you are allowed to go to get in as many units as possible. And so you're satisfying in a large way some amount of demand for those who can afford it. Because demand is to do with affordability. Some people won't demand a $20 million apartment because they can't afford that, but they still demand housing. Right. So you are satisfying a need. How much of the need for certain type of cost? That is, you can argue that to the death, right? So that is the major pro, because people need to live somewhere. There are some cons that come with it, because there are some inconveniences. So as soon as your neighbor starts yawning, you're probably here. If the actions of one basically affect the whole in a lot of senses. You have other limitations and parking. When you have your own home, you can park in your motor cars you want in there, have your dog and your cat and a goat. When you get to an apartment, there are large restrictions, so you get one parking space, but then you are maybe a professional couple with 2 kids, you have 2 cars, so then it's almost like grab bag for find an extra space, which is deemed for visitors. So these are some of the large con, I would say, is perhaps sometimes not enough privacy and all the actions of others, because it's a shared space, impact you in that space. But the big pro about it is that it allows for housing where otherwise you could not have had. People would have perhaps had to go live outside city limits. Far distancing, traveling is a cost and that kind of thing. If it's not done properly, there are other cons to that in terms of infrastructure we can talk
Right,
about.
right. Hold that thought. Gentlemen, we're up on a break. We'll be right back.
Gangs are like packs of rats. They live in filth and try and drag us all in there with them, spreading the disease of violence and corruption everywhere. But like a pack of rats, they can be eliminated with your help. If you have information on gangs, call Crime Stop on 311. This message is brought to you by Crime Stop and their marketing partners, Lime and NCB.
From generation to generation, Jamaicans have depended on J&B Bank to make the pride and joy of providing a safe place for their families possible. Now, with no processing fees and no down payment mortgage options, you can open the door to your own sweet home, a legacy to hand to your next generation. Visit jnbank.com to get pre-approved today. J&B Bank will help you find a way.
Welcome back to the Morning Watch. Thanks for staying with us. In this, the second watch, we are discussing the whole matter of so-called overbuilding multiple family houses. And we have online Mr. Donovan Reed, President of the Realtors Association of Jamaica, and Mr. Lenworth Kelly, President of the Master Builders Association. Gentlemen, welcome again to our program. Before the break, Mr. Kelly mentioned some cons, some negatives about this arrangement and this development. And I think he closed by mentioning the whole matter of infrastructure. I'm sure, Mr. Reed, that you would like to expand on that.
Yes, in fact, I'd like to share some of the pros that we see as practitioners, as realtors, just to add to what Len has said. And if I were to list some of the pros, one, it is a sign of economic development. In most developed countries, this is where countries are now going because, as Len has said, you have finite land space. Clearly, it's a greater use of the land, increase in population. We also see it as an increase in housing stock, and it is an attempt of the supply side seeking to match the demand. When you see these things happening, it's a good indicator. Another pro, it forces us to develop community spirit. And there's something else that a lot of people don't consider. When you have the multifamily, the strata, because you have the shared cost and you have the numbers, you're able to procure additional benefits that you would not normally have. For example, a swimming pool, a clubhouse, a gym, walking trails. If you are standalone, there are not many people who can afford that. And of course, the strata, by virtue of the approval process being quicker, it's a speedier way for the supply side, the developers, to assist in meeting the housing solutions. So those are the pros. In terms of cons, if it is not properly managed and monitored, it could lead to a strain in the infrastructure in terms of water, sewage, electricity, roads. We have to ensure that we want to meet the demand for housing. We have to manage that balance between meeting that demand and providing the adequate infrastructure. So that is a con that must be seriously watched, and the authorities and stakeholders have a responsibility. I would agree with Len, the loss of privacy for single family homes, and not only privacy, but sometimes even light, sometimes even a good view may be lost because of a high-rise multifamily. There are other things too that I think we need to watch. If the multifamily units, the stratas, are not properly managed, sometimes the housing stock can depreciate. The lack of proper maintenance. You may be maintaining your unit, but the complex, if you don't have a good homeowners association. And I think one last thing I'll say about the the disadvantage, is that we need to be able to develop proper community spirit, where people will understand that you are part of a whole, no man is an island. And that is critical. The multifamily is going to be managed in a holistic way.
Yeah. Mr. Kelly, the article mentioned a concern about these developments then. And I think it was focusing on the infrastructural negatives. What can be done? What should be done to correct this?
All right. So first up, we need a clearly articulated development plan for our towns and cities. I keep telling people Kingston is not Jamaica. Our towns and cities, we need a clearly articulated plan. Not something dumped up in the way the common person can understand. It must be simple, straightforward, and it must be inclusive, born out of some kind of constant engagement. We need to appreciate what densities are allowed where. I mean, we're going 50 habitable rooms per acre here. Are we going 200 over there? Can we zone that out? Can we redline that out on a map of the cities? Right? So people are clear. This will go here. There are people out there. Remember, many of us grew up with yards. There are people in the cities and towns who still want a house with yard. And you hear the numerous experiences about people going here, they're not sure they want to buy, but next thing somebody come with an apartment building beside them. We need to be able to help those persons in terms of where they will go to and who want to decide to move. But what we have started, the way we have gone about it, the regular way, what seems to be like a hodgepodge, has created the Donovan spoke about community spirit, some kind of negative in that regard, because people would have lived in communities. Pretty much your biggest investment for most of us is a house. And they would have said, okay, I'll be right here, I'll be comfortable, I retire, live in peace and quiet. And then voila, that goes. And we can't keep going along like that. But if you define the corridors, to say, okay, fine, we're going to building here and we're not going to build this density there, that kind of thing. So people can have an appreciation. And there's a constant requirement for developers to engage with the citizenry. Some mechanism to ensure that that is done would be on our way. Now, in terms of infrastructure, ideally in development, the proper way really is to put the infrastructure in first. And then you give the green light for increasing your densities. Because increasing density is simple. It's more water coming into the taps. It's more waste going out via the toilets and the sinks. It's more vehicles on the road, a higher requirement for power. So these things, but so a lot of times after the fact, where we realize that we can't get some of these things, it's about this is foolishness. So really the infrastructure should be there. We should be developing in such a way that the infrastructure can easily be expanded to suit what is required. Because you can't always, government don't have unlimited funds, so you can't always put the infrastructure there before, and the demand is for housing. People need somewhere to live, so they can't wait on you with that. But we have to have order. We are not getting a sense of any form of order. Just seems to be some kind of a hodgepodge, and we need some clear, articulated way. One of the biggest for me personally is transport. Remember, we're going to end up with gridlock. We need a proper
have it already
system. Mass where you can move mass of people is about mobility. That's really what people want. They want to get from where they are to where they need to go within a reasonable time.
Yeah, Mr. Reid, I'm picking up from what Mr. Kelly says, that we're talking about parish councils, the town planners. What about the developers? What about persons in your occupation and profession? The real estate agency. Are they not overbuilding? Just getting all these buildings going up and doing their own thing in light of the fact that we don't have what Mr. Kelly mentioned?
Well, you must remember, we are Realtors Association of Jamaica represent realtors, real estate agents. Anything with respect to the development side, the building, we sell, we market, we rent. That's what we assist with. I think Len is a better person to speak to in terms of the building.
I'm
But
speaking
what
to
I
you
will
as
say
well
though,
because you're selling them, Mr. Reed. You are selling the
yes,
houses after they are built.
because we're selling them, yes, because we are providing a service for our people. They need to listen here. What I will say though, to support what Len has said, I think he's right. We need to ensure that the development orders are in place, but I'd add a couple of things. We need to ensure proper management and governance in the approval process. And we need to enforce the law and the checks and balances in the approval process. One area of weakness I see, the stakeholder consultations and participation. If you live in a particular area and the stakeholder participation, the consultation is going to be to make sure that you go there so that your voice will be heard. I think possible solutions, some other things that we have to do, look at some other areas, the north-south highway, the east-west, where you have the road infrastructure, the St. Thomas area, the highway that is being built. Those are possible areas where we can build and expand in terms of housing. And what about gentrification, urban renewal in the downtown area? The infrastructure is already there. That is something I think we should look at also in terms of a possible solution.
Yes. Yes. And you, Mr. Kelly? And Master Builders Association.
You're talking about the development side. No,
yeah, Mr. Reed is saying you guys are doing the building, so, you know.
Oh, yes. No, and we take that. Now, on the development side, remember, there's a regulatory side that ought to check that. So remember, developers respond to some kind of need, some kind of demand. It's for them an investment. We're going.
Can you not self-regulate? Can you not self-regulate, Mr. Kelly, to know that we are over?
But hold on, no,
system?
Dylan, you need to appreciate if
Yeah, Mr. Kelly, I'm not hearing you. I don't know.
If I'm hearing you clearly,
go again. Mm-hmm.
If I'm hearing you clearly, the developers that I know, right, they toe the line. They go with whatever the order say wherever you are to go. Now, if the order says you're allowed this density here, then and the developer makes his application, it's approved, and he gets to build there, then I will argue that it's not necessarily on the part of the developer unless he has a wider view to determine that it's overbuilding. He's responding to a demand. The regulators must say, how does that fit in the overall plan? But if we don't know what the overall plan is, how can someone say you're overbuilding here or there? It looks that way to us in an anecdotal fashion. But the authorities must come in and do that regulation to define these zones to say, okay, we're going here. Once people are aware, then if you know that we can put 200 high-rises along this road, then it's not overbuilding because people know that the government's plan, the infrastructure is in place for it. So it would be deemed overbuilding. But when people are not informed, you can call pretty much anything overbuilding.
All right. So to understand, we do not have that regulatory framework at present. Is that what you're saying, Mr. Kelly?
There are provisional development orders, but I don't think they are clearly articulated. I don't know and understand and appreciate what is to be expected. That needs to be clear.
Okay. All right, gentlemen, believe it or not, we are out of time. All right. I know we could continue the discussion. I want to thank you so very much for joining us this morning. Have a productive day, gentlemen.
Thank you, Dylan. Same to you.
All right, listeners, thank you for joining us. For information, we'll get copies of this program. Call our production department, please, at 876-968. 876-968-95967. This has been the Morning Watch. Thanks to our producer, Miss Kathy Gale, and our guests. I'm Dylan Toussaint, giving a shout out to Boston members of the Twickenham Open Bible Standard of Churches. As I hand you back to Love in the Morning, with Siobhan Blair.
And the Morning Watch today is brought to you by Home and Things, your construction finishes superstore. It is 8 o'clock, folks, on the